Lagina just confirmed what no one thought possible. An ancient Templar vault has finally been uncovered beneath Oak Island. Hidden 180 feet below the swamp zone, the chamber contains metallic structures, coated carvings, and gold so pure it defies colonial history. For decades, the money pit was dismissed as legend, but new scans, artifacts, and French records prove it's far more than a myth. Stay locked in, because what the Laginas just revealed doesn't rewrite Oak Island's story. It rewrites history itself. Hit that like button, subscribe, and let's dive straight into the vault that changes everything. The announcement came quietly, almost too quietly for what it meant. After months of sonar mapping and failed boreholes, Rick's team finally hit something that didn't fit. A void, precisely 180 feet below the swamp zone, sealed and perfectly preserved. The chamber had no record in any prior excavation data. According to every geological model, it shouldn't even exist. But there it was. A hidden pocket cut into the bedrock, right beneath a tunnel that connected directly to the original money pit alignment. For Rick, it wasn't just another dig site. It was the anomaly they'd been chasing for years. The one that didn't belong. Initial scans came back strange. Metallic density readings, too heavy for natural formations, too organized for coincidence. It wasn't a single mass of debris. It was layered, intentional, designed, and it ran parallel to a secondary shaft that had never appeared on 18th-century recovery maps. That was the first real sign that this wasn't the work of any early settler or prospector. Someone had engineered this centuries before. Rick's first words after the readings came through were caught on camera. This could be the original vault. When the team finally broke through the chamber's outer seal, the first thing they saw was stone, hand-carved, water-worn, and marked. Sitting at the base of the entryway was a limestone slab, no larger than a door, bearing a symbol none of them mistook for coincidence, a weathered cross pate, the same cross used by the Knights Templar. The carving wasn't recent. It had the erosion marks of centuries. Carbon dating later confirmed what Rick already suspected. The tablet was older than any colonial settlement, older even than the first European maps of the region. What truly stunned the researchers wasn't the cross itself, but how the stone was preserved. Marine clay had been used to seal it perfectly, a technique known to prevent saltwater corrosion. That level of foresight suggested whoever built this chamber understood both geology and engineering far beyond their era. Along one edge, almost invisible under calcified buildup, was a series of etchings, coded lines, symbols that archaeologists would later find matched those hidden in Scotland's Rosslyn Chapel, a structure often tied to Templar lore. When Marty Lagina saw the match, his reaction said everything. This isn't just theory anymore. It's the first physical link to the Templar migration, right here on Oak Island. The connection was no longer abstract. It was literal, carved in stone, and preserved under layers of mud for 6 centuries. But what came next would push the discovery even further beyond belief. As the chamber opened deeper into the bedrock, the radar team ran another sweep, and this time the signals came back in perfect, uniform intervals. Metallic resonance, repeating like an echo through the chamber. Whatever was buried down there wasn't random. The scans showed structured rows, shapes too consistent to be boulders or rubble. Rick ordered a micro-drill probe, a delicate operation meant to extract trace material without collapsing the chamber. When the drill came back up, the sample tray told the story. Quartz dust mixed with fine golden particles. Not native gold, refined, hammered, melted, ancient. The kind of craftsmanship seen in relics, not currency. For the first time in years, Rick broke his usual caution and said the words that would ripple through every Oak Island forum in the world. We may not be chasing legend anymore. We're standing over it. That single line changed everything. If the gold beneath Oak Island was refined before Europeans ever set foot in Nova Scotia, then the story wasn't about hidden treasure anymore. It was about lost knowledge. The team needed context, something that could explain who buried it and why. That search didn't come from the ground. It came from history itself. Deep within the French naval archives of La Rochelle, a forgotten 1701 chart surfaced while a maritime historian reviewed colonial supply routes. Faded and brittle, the map bore a name that froze Rick and Marty when they saw it: L'Île de l'Or Perdu, the island of lost gold. The coordinates, once adjusted for magnetic drift, matched Oak Island's outline almost perfectly. But it wasn't just geography that stunned them. The marginal notes, written in a cryptic mix of Latin and Old French, referenced Les coffres du temple, the coffers of the temple, entombed beneath layers of engineered trapstone designed to collapse under intrusion. As the brothers compared the sketch to their current excavation layout, the alignment was uncanny. The chamber they just breached sat almost exactly where the map indicated the central deposit would lie. Marty called it impossible coincidence, but Rick knew better. Someone in France had drawn this centuries before anyone officially documented Oak Island's existence. That meant knowledge of the vault survived long after the Templars' suppression, possibly carried by exiled mariners who fled across the Atlantic with fragments of the Order's treasure. Further research pointed to one name repeatedly crossed out in French port records: La Rochelle's Ghost, a ship believed to have vanished during the Purge of 1307. Historians theorized it had escaped under false registry and disappeared into the western seas. The La Rochelle chart seemed to confirm its destination, and that Oak Island was never an accident. The island was the end point of a planned voyage, a refuge for something the French crown was never meant to find. Down in the chamber, excavation continued. As sediment and rock were cleared around the newly mapped passageway, one of the crew spotted a glint caught between layers of limestone. What they first thought was a wire turned out to be a fragment of a small brass chain, fused into the stone like a fossil. Once cleaned and examined under magnification, the links revealed delicate engravings, each shaped in the pattern of the Templar cross. It wasn't jewelry, it was ceremonial regalia, likely part of the vestment chains used by ranking knights. Laboratory testing confirmed it couldn't be colonial or modern. The alloy matched 13th-century French metallurgical composition, identical to chains recovered from Templar burial sites near Poitiers. Every detail, from the solder pattern to the purity ratios, screamed medieval Europe. The implications were enormous. The artifact predated any recorded European presence in the New World by at least a century and a half. The chain alone would have rewritten Oak Island's timeline, but it was what lay beneath that changed everything. While clearing the sediment around the artifact, the team uncovered a lead container, small enough to hold in two hands, yet so corroded it looked ready to disintegrate. The metal surface bore hand-tooled seams, sealed with wax and resin. Inside, miraculously preserved by centuries of anaerobic mud, was a folded parchment fragment, still clinging to its wax covering. When conservators carefully unrolled the document under humidity control, faint black ink revealed flowing medieval French script. The translation sent chills through everyone present. The text spoke of l'Arche Grande, Trammern, the Great Ark, and warned of le secret sous la rose, the secret beneath the rose. The phrasing wasn't random. Both were known Templar code phrases. The Great Ark was used in reference to relics carried from Jerusalem, while the rose represented the veil of secrecy protecting sacred knowledge. Paleographers compared the handwriting to known Templar clerical samples stored in the Archives Nationales de France. One match stood out: a scribe active in Paris up to the day the order was declared heretical in 1307. That connection placed the parchment squarely within the era of the last Grand Master himself. But even more astonishing was a hidden message. Using infrared imaging, linguists noticed faint variations in the initial letters of each line. When combined, they formed an acrostic spelling Domus Dei, Latin for House of God. To Templar scholars, that phrase carried weight far beyond religion. It referred to the inner sanctum of the order, the place where their most sacred relics were stored before being smuggled out of Europe. Rick stood over the translation table, silent for nearly a minute before speaking. "Whoever buried this didn't want it found," he said. "They wanted it remembered, but only by those who knew how to look. The chain, the parchment, the map, they weren't random artifacts. Together, they formed a trail stretching from medieval France across an ocean and ending beneath a Nova Scotian swamp. For the Laginas, the message was unmistakable. The vault wasn't just real, it was part of something designed, protected, and hidden for reasons that reached far beyond treasure. That realization changed everything. The evidence on the table wasn't just historical, it was technical. Whoever encoded these messages understood engineering, navigation, and concealment at a level centuries ahead of their time. If the artifacts were designed to lead them here, then the structure below might have been designed to stop them. Acting on that logic, the team recalibrated their borehole coordinates and began probing the area just beyond the vault alignment. What they found defied every previous survey. The next chamber wasn't like the others. It wasn't simple masonry or buried stonework. It was engineered. As the crew drilled deeper past the sediment barrier, the borehole camera revealed something no one expected. A wooden and brass lattice woven through the bedrock itself. It wasn't natural collapse material. It was deliberate construction, a trap. The timbers were pegged with brass pulleys and water valves arranged in a cross pattern, the kind of counterweight system seen in ancient ship rigging. Every movement was linked to another, forming a mechanical web. One wrong move, and the entire structure would flood or collapse. Whoever built it hadn't intended to preserve the chamber. They'd intended to guard it. The engineering shouldn't have existed in the 1300s. Yet every joint, every fastener, every measured angle showed precision beyond the technology of its supposed time. Maritime engineers later confirmed the design mimicked naval pulley systems used to lift anchors or stabilize cargo on medieval ships. That detail aligned with one unsettling theory. The builders were not land-based masons, but Templar mariners. These were men who fled Europe by sea, adapting their shipbuilding expertise into subterranean traps. For Rick, the discovery reframed everything. The Oak Island vault wasn't random, it was nautical. It had been built by sailors hiding something meant never to resurface. As they cleared the debris cautiously, one phrase Rick muttered over the comms summed up the tension in the air. "This isn't a vault made to be found. It's one designed to destroy itself if anyone tried." The phrase stuck. Even the crew began calling it the Guardian Mechanism, a fitting name for what they were now trying to outsmart. Every turn of the bore tool felt like a gamble, every vibration monitored in real time to prevent triggering collapse. What they didn't know yet was that the mechanism itself was only half the code. The other half was above ground. Using newly imported LIDAR imaging to survey the island's surface, the team discovered something remarkable. Beneath the foliage and uneven terrain, a network of drilled stone markers emerged. They weren't random boulders or glacial deposits. Each had been positioned deliberately, forming a geometric alignment that stretched from Smith's Cove to the Money Pit and across to the swamp. When plotted on digital overlay, the alignment traced a perfect symmetrical cross. It wasn't simply symbolic, it was cartographic. Each intersection matched a known dig site or anomaly previously dismissed as natural. When Marty connected the final coordinates and rotated the model to celestial orientation, The outline mirrored the constellation Orion with near-perfect accuracy. The same pattern appeared in ancient Templar star charts used for navigation. This couldn't have been chance. The Templars had encoded their vault map using the heavens themselves as reference points, ensuring that only those who understood the stars could follow their design centuries later. Rick was silent as the pattern stabilized on screen. The Money Pit, Smith's Cove, the new vault, all marked the three brightest points of Orion's belt. The realization hit all at once. The island itself wasn't just a hiding place, it was an instrument, a celestial code translated into geography. Every trap, every shaft, every buried artifact was part of a larger mechanism built to safeguard one central chamber. What they'd been calling the treasure might only be the outer layer of a design built with spiritual precision. When excavation resumed beneath the newly charted cross alignment, the bore finally breached another cavity, this time lined not with timber, but limestone polished smooth. At its center stood an arched gate sealed tight, carved with an unmistakable symbol, a single rose in full bloom, encircled by vines and cross stems. The design wasn't decorative. It was identical to the Rosy Cross, the emblem later adopted by the Rosicrucians, an order that many historians believe evolved directly from the surviving Templars. The carving's placement left no doubt. This was the threshold to the central vault, the heart of everything the island had been designed to conceal. Even before they touched it, the scanners confirmed what lay beyond. Metal density readings spiked to levels no one had seen before. Dense, structured, and perfectly enclosed. Whatever was sealed behind that rose-carved gate was metallic, and there was a lot of it. The magnetometer struggled to read properly. The sheer volume of gold and alloy distorted the signal. It was enough mass to outweigh the entire Money Pit hoard combined. For the first time, the data wasn't ambiguous. This wasn't just legend. The readings suggested a solid cache. Coffers, chests, perhaps dozens, packed into a single stone chamber. Rick made the call to halt manual drilling. No one wanted to trigger another Guardian collapse. Conservation experts were brought in immediately, equipped with micro-cameras and non-invasive imaging tools. Through a narrow borehole no wider than a pencil, they inserted a fiber optic lens into the cavity beyond the gate. The live feed displayed a narrow corridor lined with limestone blocks and littered with centuries of silt. Then, just as the camera adjusted its focus, a faint glimmer cut through the dark, reflected light bouncing off a surface below. The crew went silent. The reflection wasn't random. It was gold, unmistakable under the LED's beam, muted, ancient, and untouched. The longer the camera lingered, the more reflections appeared, like ripples of light dancing off buried artifacts. It wasn't one object. It was dozens, maybe hundreds. A vault of gold sealed under the rose, undisturbed for over 600 years. Rick didn't speak, but everyone could read his expression. Awe, disbelief, and something else. A deep recognition that what they were seeing wasn't just wealth. It was a message encoded in stone, geometry, and faith. For centuries, the story of Oak Island had been one of misdirection, false trails, and engineered failure. But now, as the camera captured the shimmering depths behind that rose gate, one thing was finally clear. The island had never been hiding treasure for the sake of riches. It had been guarding a secret of purpose. As the camera feed stabilized, the glare of gold began to resolve into forms, angles, reflections, and shadows that hinted at deliberate placement rather than chaos. Then, deep in the center of the chamber, a single object stood apart from everything else. It wasn't a coffer or bar. It was sculpted, precise, an ornate chalice resting upright on a limestone pedestal. Even through the murky feed, its form was unmistakable. Wide bowl, flared rim, stem wrapped in vine motifs. When the extraction team finally recovered it days later, silence filled the room. The artifact's weight alone seemed to carry centuries. Its surface shimmered, not like standard gold, but with a warmer hue, an alloy unknown to modern smithing. Laboratory spectrometry later confirmed the impossible. The chalice was forged from Byzantine gold mixed with Frankish silver, a metallurgical blend unseen since the 12th century. Every line, every etching, told the story of two worlds, East and West, united not by conquest, but by faith, wealth, and secrecy. Under magnification, delicate etchings traced along the inner rim formed a Latin inscription, Veritas sub rosa, truth under the rose. The phrase was a hallmark of Templar secrecy, used in their confessions suppressed by the French crown during the Purge. It signified vows made under the rose in absolute silence. Rick recognized the weight of those words immediately. This wasn't just a symbol. It was a declaration, a hidden oath preserved in metal. This could be the artifact they died to protect, he said quietly, almost to himself. No one replied. Every camera in the room focused on that single chalice gleaming under the floodlights, its shadow stretching across centuries of myth. Word of the discovery spread fast. Within weeks, communications arrived from the Vatican's Department of Sacred Antiquities. They requested high-resolution imagery, metallurgical reports, and provenance data. The message wasn't casual. It was formal, deliberate, and classified. Rick's team complied, submitting the initial findings through proper archaeological channels. Days later, an archivist from the Vatican's Historical Office reached out directly. His statement stunned the crew. The chalice's dimensions and inscriptions matched a missing reliquary listed in the papal inventories of 1312, an object believed lost when the Templar archives were seized and burned. According to those records, the reliquary had contained relic fragments said to originate from the early Church of Jerusalem, possibly artifacts carried from the Holy Land during the Crusades. It was last recorded under the custody of the Templar Order's Grand Preceptor of France before the arrests began. No record of its confiscation, destruction, or transfer ever surfaced. For centuries, its trail simply ended. Now, after 600 years, it had reappeared beneath a Nova Scotian island. The Vatican's interest wasn't symbolic. They proposed a joint review under international heritage law. Legal teams from Canada, France, and the Holy See convened to determine ownership and preservation rights. The find had crossed from television mystery into diplomatic reality. Heritage law dictated that any artifact predating colonial settlement and connected to European history could fall under shared custody. But religious relics added another layer: spiritual jurisdiction. The chalice wasn't just a historic object, it might have been considered sacred property. Marty summed it up plainly. This just became bigger than Oak Island. It's global. Overnight, the dig site transformed from a treasure hunt to an archaeological fortress. Security intensified. Legal observers arrived. Media access was restricted. Every artifact, sample, and data file was sealed for chain of custody preservation. Yet through the political noise, Rick's focus remained unshaken. He wasn't interested in ownership. He wanted meaning, proof of purpose. That proof came quietly, through analysis of the very first artifact they dismissed months earlier. The limestone Templar tablet discovered at the chamber's entrance. A visiting epigrapher suggested reanalyzing it under full-spectrum infrared light. When they did, faint lines beneath the visible carvings emerged, revealing previously unseen text, etched in a layered script. These weren't decorative markings, they were coordinates, but not for Nova Scotia. Cross-referenced against modern mapping, the coordinates pointed far into the North Atlantic, an isolated landmass roughly 1,200 kilometers away, uninhabited and largely uncharted. The notation accompanying the coordinates read, in Latin, Hic est arca minor, arca major ultra ea cet, Translation: This is the lesser vault. The greater lies beyond. The implications hit instantly. Everything uncovered on Oak Island, the traps, the codes, the coffers, wasn't the final destination. It was a waypoint, a map. Rick spread the parchment reproductions across the table, comparing the symbols from the tablet with the ones carved into the chalice's rim. The rose motif repeated, connecting both artifacts. It was no coincidence. The rose was the cipher key. Under the rose, sub rosa, wasn't just a phrase of secrecy, it was literal, a pointer. The rose symbol carved on Oak Island was the gateway to the truth that lay beyond. As they overlaid the LIDAR map of Oak Island's geometric cross with the newly uncovered coordinates, a chilling symmetry appeared. The same star alignment that mapped Orion over Nova Scotia now extended perfectly to the second location. The pattern wasn't broken, it was unfinished. Oak Island represented one half of a celestial equation, a mirrored constellation pointing across the sea to its twin. Historians began revisiting the legend of the Templar fleet's escape. Some ships had been accounted for. Others vanished without record. What if the fleet hadn't been destroyed but divided? Half remained to construct the lesser vault. The other half sailed onward to create the greater one, ensuring the Order's most sacred relics could never be claimed by any king or church. The chalice wasn't the end. It was the proof of continuity, the tangible link between two sanctuaries built in secrecy across an ocean. Rick stared at the data spread, the weight of realization settling over him. The vault they'd uncovered wasn't a burial ground for treasure. It was a decoy, a safeguard. The true Templar legacy, whatever it was, remained hidden somewhere across the North Atlantic, and the tablet's inscription was an invitation left for those willing to see past gold. The chamber on Oak Island would soon be sealed under government protection, but before the closure, Rick made one final visit. Standing in the vault's narrow corridor, he traced his hand over the rose carving on the limestone gate. Beneath the floodlights, the surface shimmered faintly, the etched petals forming concentric circles around a small center mark. A compass rose, perfectly aligned to true north. The message was clear now. Every clue, every artifact, every misdirection over centuries had pointed to a single truth. Oak Island was never the treasure. It was the map leading to one. Rick turned to the camera crew, his voice steady but heavy with understanding. "If this is the lesser vault," he said, eyes fixed on the carved rose before him, "then what's waiting in the greater one?" And with that, the lens pulled back, capturing the chamber one last time. The chalice glinting under soft light, the rose carved into the gate, and the faint echo of seawater dripping from the ceiling. An unfinished story suspended between history and legend, waiting for its next chapter to begin.